You know, sometimes you have to know where you've been in order to understand where you're going. Stay tuned and learn more about genealogy. I am so excited, Dr. Clark. I am just so excited. I mean, from the bottom of my heart to have you with us today. Thank you for driving all the way in from Detroit to be with us to talk about something that is just a growing, I don't want to say phenomenon, but it's a growing interest of people, and that's genealogy. And you just tell, I won't even talk about it. You tell us about yourself. Tell us, first of all, I know you were a former educator. You worked, tell us about yourself.
Well,
I'm just happy to have you here.
I am happily retired from Wayne State University, where I worked there and in many other institutions for about 35 years. So I had a long career as an academic administrator. And it was part of what led into the transition of what I do now. I've always been a problem solver or a seeker of knowledge in order to make things happen better. So being an educator and being an administrator and helping other people.
Assistant Dean, right?
Assistant Dean at Wayne State University, the College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. And it was a wonderful, wonderful career. But when I decided it was time to go, one of the things that I wanted to do was spend more time learning about my family. I had started probably about 35 years earlier. I had this box of information that when I had started my PhD, I put it under the desk. I remember that motion because I was going to be consumed with doing my dissertation. So I said, let me put this away for a while. So I've been doing it for many years.
Wow. And so tell us about that transition. Now that you're out of formalized education, you are still in education in so many ways with genealogy, and you've been hosting, teaching, helping people throughout the country really with learning about their genealogy. Why is knowing about our genealogy important?
Our history is who we are. We are who we are because of what our ancestors did, and it's just that simple. And I think their stories are dynamic. Their stories are of bravery. There are things that we can't imagine. And so what led me to genealogy was a curiosity about one of my grandparents. This picture that I saw of her when I was probably about 4 years old. I remember going into my grandfather's house, and every time I'd go, I'd look up at the wall, and it was a picture of her and her husband. I didn't have the skill set to ask who are those people, but her eyes caught me. And I remember that from about 4 years old. So every time from when I was 4 until 17, I would walk and look at her. And later I thought, I wonder how that connects to me. And so that's where my curiosity began.
Wow. And so when someone out there is listening and they've always wanted to learn more about their lineage, their genealogy, their great grandparents, where do you start? I mean, it can be an overwhelming task when folks just mail something in and have someone else do it, but it's really quite interesting and therapeutic when you do it yourself, right?
It really is.
Yeah, so where do people begin if they want to learn more about their ancestors?
The simple place is start at home. In the genealogy world, we call that the home archives.
Like the picture on the wall, right?
The picture on the wall, those pieces of paper that you think, oh, just throw that away, it means nothing. But if it has your father or mother's handwriting on it after they're gone, when you're cleaning out the house and kind of putting things in order for someone else to move in, keep those scraps of paper. It might be a journal that you find. It might be a calendar where someone recorded things that happened every day of their life, things that you can't find in a library. So that home archive is the first place to start. Pictures that you have, pictures because, in the 40s and 50s, they didn't have digital cameras. Right. And so if there was a picture, it might have been the only one. Was there something on the back that identified who those people were? Did your parents tell you stories about those pictures? What did your parents tell you and your siblings? Because they may have told you different stories. So collect all that information in your home and from your family. it's a perfect place to start.
And then what do you do with it?
Well, you can then go to local sources like the library, where there might be newspapers, there might be people. I usually say try to contact or talk to the oldest person in your family because they are a walking library. They know things that you're not going to find in the courthouse or you're not going to find
Right.
anywhere else or online. Talk to them. Um, we say interview them, but just have a conversation because sometimes when you say interview somebody,
Yeah, it's a
they
little
freeze up.
intimidating.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know anything. So just have little conversations with them and record that information.
It's like, when you talk about recording, I can't tell you how many older friends that I have, and one of the things that I've always wanted to do, in some cases have done, was record just talking, their stories. They were here when they were still horse and buggy. Just the stories are so rich and powerful, and you don't realize how powerful they are sometimes when they're talking, as they talk, maybe all the time, but when they're not talking about them anymore, they're not captured anywhere. Right?
Yes. And so sometimes if you just say, do you mind if I just, turn on my phone so we can record this conversation, kind of make it as minimally intimidating as possible and just talk. What I did, I had one of my great aunts, she would send me tapes of her talking. She said, I probably told you this in a tape before, but she just talked. And what I did was listen to those tapes, and she had so much detail in her conversations, where people lived, the name of all the children in the family, how old they were. Then I went to the census and I tried to find those families on the census record, and I could find those families based on the names that she gave me. And this is in the 1920s and 1930s. And so if you have someone that is willing to talk, let them talk. If they don't want to talk, just ask, can I just take a few notes while we talk?
Yes. That's one of the things from a personal point of view. That's one of the things I started giving new grandparents, either a journal, depending on who it is, or one of those little microphones where they could just talk. Because some people don't like writing as much. Journals are fantastic. But just every day when they get this new grandbaby, just say how you feel, what's going on, who they remind you of. And it's so precious to have 15, 16 years later to have those words from your grandma, your Mimi, or whatever. So when you talk to people about getting started, are there clubs? Because sometimes folks want to do this with other people. They don't, they struggle a little bit. And I want you to talk about that. How can people get involved with a community of genealogists? And also, what does it do when you learn about your history? How do the self-confidence and just talk about that as well.
Okay. There are genealogy clubs from coast to coast, and many of them, during the pandemic, I learned this firsthand, many of them welcome you regardless of your geographical location. So locally, you can see if there's a local historical society to belong to. You can look online. There's this website called Conference Keeper. They put daily, they have all kind of genealogy presentations that are going on. Many of those are given by genealogical associations. Many of them welcome new members based on your interest or your geographical location. I belong to Arkansas's Genealogical Association because my ancestors are from Arkansas. I belong to a group in Indiana because I found out about them during the pandemic. I belong to a group in New Jersey. And we've become genealogy family. So find a group, join the group. There's several in the Detroit area, phenomenal researchers and phenomenal groups in the Detroit area. So just get online and search for either historical societies or genealogy groups, and a plethora of information will come up.
Fantastic. So it's easy to access, but once you learn about some of your history, what does that do for you professionally, emotionally, personally? How does that change your perspective of who you are?
There was a pride that I cannot describe that I felt as I began to learn about not only what my ancestors did with minimal or no access to the kind of resources that we have now, but it also made me know why I do some of the things that I do that I couldn't explain,
Understand yourself better.
and how I came about some of the skills that I have. it makes you proud and it makes you want to tell their stories because they didn't have that ability to tell those stories.
That's powerful. That's powerful. What if you find something that doesn't make you so proud?
As a genealogist, you always want to do no harm. You know, there are some things that you find out and you just find them out and you don't share them because it's not going to make anybody feel better about themselves. There are some shocking things in all of our families. You want to give them the respect. You want to honor the family because we don't know what led to those situations that they had to go through. And so you always want to, first do no harm to anyone. Um, I share things like that with my genealogy partners to process them, especially if it's about my family. We talk about it, but as far as documenting those things, that's not the kind of thing that you would put out in a book or on a blog or something like that. You just respectfully honor those
And you
things.
know that you're not always who your past is, so it doesn't mean that because someone else did, you find out something negative about someone in your family, it doesn't mean that it's going to, that's who you are, right? You've
Right.
got to separate that sometimes as well, I would imagine. Tell us one of the stories that you remember the most in terms of either your own journey or someone else's journey and what they learned or discovered that was, that still stays with you today.
I always heard from two people, two of my, they were actually grand aunts, that there was land in the family, and this was in Coffee County, Alabama. And both of these individuals, one of them, she gave a lot of oral history, and she could talk a mile a minute, and she could talk a lot. And so usually I was just taking notes when I was listening to her on the phone. The other aunt, she was the one who sent me the audio tapes. But they said there's land in the family. I didn't know what that meant. During the pandemic, I found out what that meant. It meant that I had ancestors that were homesteaders. They weren't sharecroppers, which was a whole different way of working the land. They owned the land. And as I began to find out about my one great grandfather that was a homesteader, I then found out that his father was a homesteader. I then found out that several other uncles were homesteaders. I found a community of over 40 families that were homestead families that had not been talked about in our family. And so that's what I'm currently researching right now. And these individuals that I found thus far owned over 5,000 acres of land collectively in Coffee County, Alabama.
So you don't hear, we don't read or hear about that
No,
at all. How
no.
far back has someone gone in terms of studying their ancestry and or their genealogy? I mean, what's reasonable? 50 years, 100 years, 200 years? What's a reasonable amount of time that you can actually find information?
Um, you can go back as far as you continue to
As far as you can
search.
go back, right?
Right. A lot of people talk about the 1890 brick wall when the census, most of the census was burned, but there are several other records that you can use to go further back. There's a lot of people that talk about 1870 as a brick wall for African Americans because that's when a lot of people kind of lose the ability to trace their families. Um, in the African American community, you always have to do research on other communities as well to find your community. So, in many instances, you may have to do research on white ancestors. And for that reason, you can go back very, very far. I've traced back into the 1700s for some of my ancestors, the enslaver of some of my ancestors, and the family connection. So, it's possible.
You know, one of the things that I have learned in the last couple of years is how manufacturing, the important role that manufacturing played in terms of bringing particularly African Americans and others to Michigan, with General Motors being here and some of the other plants being here, and they would actually bring people up from the South and tell them where to live. So my question to you is, so much of who and what we are, education, you know, the race relations, is systematic. It's not, it was the laws and the policies and all that. So can you talk a little bit about how that's changed or has it changed?
Wow. That's a whole nother show.
The impact of our ancestry on the economy. Let's put it that way.
Well, I know, and I'll use my own family as an example. Several of my own family migrated from Arkansas and Alabama and migrated to the Detroit, Flint, and Vassar, Michigan area. And many of them came in groups, and many of them, as they found out about the jobs, they told others and brought them up along with them. That changed the trajectory of our family because many of my uncles were in General Motors. Many of my aunts and uncles worked at General Motors in Flint. And we know that during the 70s, 80s, and what the automotive industry was during that time. So that created a whole different lifestyle from what they had when they were in Alabama and Arkansas. And I am a product of that.
Wow, wow. We're so mobile today, right? Young people, as you know, from college, they take jobs all over the country anymore, and they might even commute from one state to another state. But then at that time, 30 years ago, 20, it wasn't always that way. So like you were saying, it came in as a community. And it's just interesting to learn about how you settled or how your family settled where they settled and why, and what that means in terms of just the history and why I'm in Lansing, why you're in Arkansas, whatever the location might be. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of, we talked about the importance of knowing your genealogy, but how that can actually help you in terms of just moving forward in your own life, not making, I don't want to say not making the same mistakes, but understanding the history. What that does for a person once they understand their history, their ancestry, their lineage, what does that do?
Well, I think it helps you to gain a greater appreciation of what your ancestors had to go through so that you could be where you are. They carried the baton from point A to point B and handed it off to you, and what we do with it is up to us. But learning about what they had to go through, learning about the challenges, and you can do the research, but then you also have to think about the historical context and what was going on during that time. And so that's a whole nother layer that you add to the stories of our ancestors. And just as an example, I talked about my ancestors who were homesteaders, and this was during the late 1880s, early 1900s, and on. Well, during that time in Alabama, there were many things going on. In addition to there were various plagues and things like we
Right.
just experienced with the pandemic. There was the depression and all of these things, and I did not see evidence of that in my family history as I did the research because they were self-sufficient. They were living off the land. They were creating crops. They were eating the crops. They were
Right.
self-sufficient.
Right.
And so I didn't see any major deaths or impacts from the flu pandemic of 1917, 1918. I did see, there was tuberculosis and there were those kind of illnesses that did take some of the lives of some of the families. But just to understand what our families did during history, that they couldn't control the history, but they could control their circumstances, and they were able to survive through that. And I'm here because of them. It really gives you a
It does give
pride.
you a spark too that you can do it. Understand that they did it. I mean, it's such an entrepreneurial spirit that's attached to our history. I read this book some time ago about Who Owns the Ice House, about an African American. It was the only business person in the Deep South who owned an ice house, and how entrepreneurial that was, because everybody needed ice. I
Everybody
mean, it's
needed
just
us.
that you realize as a young person, as an older person, that you can overcome all sorts of challenges, and it's particularly during Black History Month. It's nice to be every month. It's nice to kind of just sit down and pause and reflect on exactly how we got to where we are and the rich history that's attached to all of us. We've got about 20 seconds left. What are some of the closing comments? Give people something where they can go and get started, get motivated to go start looking at their ancestry and their genealogy.
Talk to the oldest person alive
Yes.
in your family.
Don't
Ask,
come to me. I am not the oldest. Okay, go ahead.
go to the census of where your people came from and find them on the census. Look and see how many people were in the household. Look and see if you can find what their professions were during that time.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. You are just such a breath of fresh air, and you just inspire all of us. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Many people are looking for alternatives for their loved ones. They may not be able to keep them at home. So there are some options. And thank you for being with us, Darlene, to talk about those options, particularly adult foster home care.
Awesome. Thank you, Paula, for having me. I appreciate this conversation. Yes, it is another opportunity and option for families to have their loved ones stay in a smaller setting as an adult family home. We're located a lot of times in neighborhoods, mature neighborhoods, nice, quiet neighborhoods. The goal is to offer a warm, clean, safe environment and more personal care to their loved ones. Help with, managing meals and laundry, take a lot of that responsibility away from them. So when they do visit their loved ones, they're visiting them and not helping them as far as with bathing and working. We take that out of the equation for them so that the loved ones can live a long, healthy life without any worries. And then also the family, they can come visit and participate with the loved one without worrying about all the details.
And that's a family within a family in many ways, right?
Exactly.
It's a much more intimate setting.
Yes, it is a very intimate setting. We call ourselves their personal assistants, our extended family members. We advocate for them, and that's what direct care workers do, advocate for family members. And that's why we need so many more people to come aboard and help us with this, advocation for our older seniors.
Right, we need more direct care workers because
Absolutely.
we're aging, and that's a good thing.
It is. It is.
But we need more direct care workers, so people need to consider that as an option for their career. Thank you so much for being with us today, Darlene, and thank you for what you do.
Awesome. Thank you again, Paula.
So we've all talked about the sandwich generation. What is the sandwich generation? What do we need to know about?
Yeah, the sandwich generation is the generation that ate sandwiches. No, that's not that. Sandwich generation, the idea is you've got folks who are caring for parents and caring for their own children, and they're kind of in between. And we could spend the rest of the day talking about situations we've had where kids did just that. The sandwich generation was a real thing. It was everywhere. It's what happened. What we're seeing now, though, is that's really kind of past. The generation of kids, and there's still a lot out there. I'm not saying there are none. Absolutely. There are a lot out there. But what we're seeing more and more is when the kids try to take care of mom and dad, they'll come to us and we'll say, well, here's the PACE program, here's these other supports that you get. Oh no, we're going to take care of mom ourselves. Well, they're back in 2 weeks saying, I had no idea that there was so much involved. And so, for your own sake, if you're counting on your kids to care for you, nowadays, back in the past, yeah, that was a real thing. Right. And you could get help from the church lady. Right. Well, the church lady needs long-term care herself now, and she's not being brought along. And so, you've got to do the planning. This is what the elder law is all about. Is about making sure that when you need resources, the resources will be there. The resources you paid for will be there to serve you. Yeah. And that sandwich generation, it was a real thing, but...
And that caregiver needs to take care of themselves. So thank you so much, David. I appreciate that. Thank you. Dr. June, so many people don't know the difference between inflammation and autoimmune. Share with us what they should know.
Well, that's a very large question, and so I'll give you a very small answer, is inflammation isn't necessarily autoimmune. So a lot of people do get that confused. An example, if someone were to hit you with a baseball bat, I hope that never happens.
Yeah, they better hope it never happens.
Yeah. You're going to swell up and you're going to get localized inflammation from damaged cells. That doesn't mean you have an autoimmune problem. It's just a localized inflammation. Sometimes people get things called gout, and that's technically autoinflammation, and your immune system's trying to fight back, but it's not necessarily autoimmune per se. Now, autoimmune can be a huge variety of things. Most people are aware of lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis. Those are autoimmune mediated diseases where your immune system is attacking your body. So that doesn't mean that inflammation can't be a part of it, but just because something's inflammatory doesn't not necessarily mean it's autoimmune. And just because it's autoimmune doesn't always mean it's inflammatory.
And so what should you do if you're not sure? Do you need to see a doctor regardless?
Start with your primary care, and if you really are convinced you have an inflammatory or an autoimmune problem, see a rheumatologist or an immunologist, and they'll do the workup and see if you indeed have an autoimmune or an inflammatory condition and what to do about it.
And you mentioned gout, you mentioned the baseball bat. Will they be able to distinguish exactly what's going on and what's caused it, or just identify it?
Well, I'd love to say we always and exactly anything. The answer is that they're going to give it the best try they can to try to answer what's going on. We live in a time, though, where rheumatoid arthritis, and to a lesser extent lupus, are pretty obvious when you have the full-blown symptoms. But a lot of this flies under the radar because not everything's read the textbook. Right. So sometimes you get unusual presentations of these fairly rare diseases, and that's when they really have to do blood work and over time and different types of radiology to try to figure out really what the diagnosis is. It's not easy.
And there you have it. Thank you, Dr. June. Appreciate it.
CATA's regional mobility solutions can help seniors seize the day. Hear what our writers and community leaders have to say about the value CATA brings to the lives of aging adults.
My name is Richard Foster. I went to junior college, graduated with a degree in writing and photography. When I graduated from Eastern Michigan, I moved up to Lansing. Then my car died and I started using the bus, and I've been using the bus for a little bit more than 20 years. CATA is extremely valuable because it allows me to get around anywhere in the city, and now with some of the extended services, I'm able to go farther out of town. The money I save with the Veterans Pass allows me to go to movies, go out to dinner. I use CATA for everything pretty much. Shopping, going to the doctor, going to the library, anything that I don't feel like walking towards. Between where I live, there's 2 stops, one to the west and one to the east. And it's nice when I get up in the morning and have to go somewhere, I can either catch a bus going out, or if I have to do something downtown, I go across the street and catch the Route 8 when it's going in. Well, I've gotten to know all of the drivers. I know a lot of my first name. It's nice when I can hop on the bus, say hello, they know my face. It's like hi, and I make jokes with them, carry on conversation. I think CATA is necessary for the community because, there's a lot of people that don't have transportation. Plus, it's good for the environment. I think CATA's doing a good job.
So much great information today. Thank you for watching. Hopefully there was news that you can use.